executioner.
Lee sags against the ropes. He's out of it. Marvin Hagler has knocked him out.
He was going to take his dignity, he was going to take his life, and he was going to go.
He used to intimidate his opponent. They used to be afraid to just be going into the ring with him.
Power. He's more of a pounding. Just think of a piston just constantly pounding. It's like a thud. It's like boom.
He had a chin of iron. He had the heart of a lion. He had the killer instinct in him. He hated his opponents.
That's his mentality. To be angry. So that when he's in that ring, he just wants to just...
There was no wrapping on this package. You got what was there. War, destruct and destroy, everything about him focused. And this bullet head made the whole Marvin Hagler look like exactly what he should have been.
Marvin Hagler's attitude that the boxing establishment was always against him, they wanted to win, it was mostly paranoid.
People loved him. Fans adored him. They admired him. Marvin was so insecure about that. For some reason, he was like a horse with blinders on. He didn't see that. But it was out there. It was always out there. He just never let it in.
A lot of Marvin's rage was born in the fact that he was disrespected his whole career. That served to motivate him. And if you're Marvin Hagler and you know how good you are, that's very hard to swallow.
He was coming.
There were 165 punches in 180 seconds, and every one of them thrown with the intention to hurt the opponent.
He said many times that I wanted to be somebody. Didn't know what he was, but I wanted to be somebody. I didn't want to just be another run-of-the-mill guy, and boxing was the thing that was foremost on his mind.
What do you do when a boxing legend looks you in the eye and tells you that you will never make it to the top? Joe Frazier, the heavyweight icon, once told a young middleweight fighter these exact words. You have 3 strikes against you. You are black, you are a southpaw, and you are good. That fighter was Marvin Hagler, and what happened next would prove Frazier both right and devastatingly wrong. Because the same 3 strikes that were supposed to destroy his career became the foundation of one of the most feared champions in boxing history. Frazier's warning was not just talk, it was reality. Being black meant fighting in an era where prejudice decided who got opportunities. Being a southpaw meant promoters avoided you because orthodox fighters refused the challenge. Being good meant you were too dangerous for up-and-comers but not marketable enough for champions. Hagler had to travel across the country, fighting in his opponents' hometowns just to get work. Philadelphia, Boston, anywhere that would have him. He fought 50 professional bouts before getting his first title shot. And when that moment finally came in 1979 against Vito Antuofermo, the judges gave him a draw, despite Hagler clearly winning. Another door slammed in his face. But those who saw him in the gym knew something terrifying was building. Buster Drayton, a boxer who worked with the Hagler camp, tried to warn sparring partners, fight. You cannot just go in and spar. Marv does not ease up on you. He comes to work. Hagler called his training camps in Provincetown self-imposed. In 1980, Hagler finally won the middleweight title by destroying Alan Minter in London. But even that moment was stolen. A riot broke out. Bottles rained down. Police escorted him out before he could celebrate. Hagler later said he believed he was still the only champion in the world who never received the belt inside the ring once he won the title. That bitterness became fuel. Once Hagler had that belt, everyone who stepped into the ring with him realized Frazier forgot to mention a 4th strike. He was absolutely relentless. Years later, Mike Tyson would explain what made Hagler different from every other fighter. You cannot keep Marvin Hagler off you. If you do not try and take him out, you will lose. He is crazy. You cannot box him like that. Thomas Hearns learned this the hard way. The two had circled each other for 3 years, with Hearns twice pulling out due to hand injuries. When they finally met, on April 15, 1985, at Caesar's Palace, Hagler wore a baseball cap throughout training camp with one word stitched across the front: war. It was not hype, it was a promise. The opening bell rang, and both men immediately started throwing bombs. Hearns landed his best punch, a devastating right hand, flush on Hagler's chin. The champion stepped back for a split second, then walked straight through it. Within that first round, Hearns broke his right hand, hitting Hagler's skull. Hagler suffered a deep cut on his forehead from the collision of heads and fists. Neither man stopped. Legendary commentator Al Michaels screamed at the end of round 1, "This is still only the first round!" His broadcast partner Al Bernstein said something he rarely did. "I am not given to hyperbole, but I said at the end of the round, perhaps one of the best rounds in middleweight history. Since then, no one has ever argued with that declaration." The Ring magazine would later call it the greatest round in boxing history. By round 3, blood was pouring down Hagler's face like a crimson river. The referee stopped the action and called the ringside doctor to examine the cut. The crowd held its breath. If the doctor stopped the fight, Hagler would lose his title on a technicality. The doctor asked if he could see clearly. Hagler looked at him and said 6 words that have echoed through boxing ever since. "I am not missing him, am I?" The doctor let the fight continue. 90 seconds later, Hagler landed an overhand right that sent Hearns stumbling into the ropes. The challenger rose at the count of 9, but collapsed into the referee's arms. It was over. Hearns later admitted, "What can I say? It happens to the best of us. It hurts, but the man showed his greatness tonight." Years after, Hearns would reflect on that broken hand. "I hit him so hard, I broke my own hand, and Marvin took it." That was pretty much the fight there. But Hearns was not the only legend who learned Hagler was different. 6 months before the war, Hagler faced Roberto Duran in November 1983. Everyone expected another explosive battle. Instead, they got 15 rounds of tactical chess. Duran, one of the most aggressive fighters in history, boxed from the outside. He waited and countered. He made Hagler come to him. Hagler's trainer, Goody Petronelli, saw the problem immediately. Duran waited and waited and waited for Marvin to lead. We had to change our tactics and go on the offensive, which is not really Marvin's style. After 13 rounds, Duran was actually ahead on 2 of the 3 judges' scorecards. But Hagler dug deep and dominated the final 2 rounds to take a razor-thin, unanimous decision. Immediately after the fight, Duran was furious. He came to tear my head off, but when he saw that I could hit him hard, with strength, he got scared and became a coward. That is why he did not take too many chances and mix it up with me. Years later, though, Duran's anger turned to respect. I still feel in my heart that I won the fight. Nobody wanted to fight Marvin because he was knocking off everyone. Duran went on to say something even more revealing. "I would really have liked a second fight with Hagler. In fact, he promised me one, but he never gave it. I had him figured out, the way he would switch from orthodox to southpaw." That rematch never happened, because someone else was watching. Someone who had retired 3 years earlier, but saw an opportunity. Sugar Ray Leonard sat ringside in March 1986, when Hagler fought John Mugabe in a brutal 11-round war. Leonard later admitted, "I saw something that I felt I could take advantage of. Mugabe was outmaneuvering Hagler, outboxing him." Leonard saw a champion who was slowing down. He came out of retirement for one more fight, the biggest payday of both their careers. But something strange happened when they finally met. On April 6, 1987, Hagler, one of the greatest southpaws of all time, came out fighting orthodox, right-handed. Boxing analyst Teddy Atlas later explained the psychology behind this decision. He comes out orthodox. Why? Because he felt for all these years he did not get his due. He was tying his hands behind his back, saying to the world, "You did not respect me enough. I am going to beat your golden boy, orthodox." Hagler wanted to prove he could beat Leonard at his own game. It was pride. It was wounded ego. And it may have cost him the fight. 30 years later, Leonard would admit how terrified he actually was. I was so scared. But I looked over at him, and I thought he was just as nervous. The fight went the full 12 rounds. When the decision was announced, one judge scored it a reasonable 115-113 for Leonard. Another had it 115-113 for Hagler. But the third judge, Jojo Guerra, turned in a scorecard that stunned the boxing world. 118-110 for Leonard. Leonard was announced the new middleweight champion by split decision. Hagler was convinced he had been robbed again. He later claimed that as the two fighters embraced in the ring after the final bell, Leonard whispered to him, "You beat me, man." Hagler said after the fight, he said, "I beat him, and I was so happy." Leonard denied ever saying it, but HBO cameras and microphones allegedly supported Hagler's version. Regardless of what was actually said, Hagler walked out of that ring and made a decision. He never put on boxing gloves again, not even for training. At 33 years old, with plenty of fights left in him, marvelous Marvin Hagler retired. He moved to Italy and became an actor. Sugar Ray Leonard later said something telling about that moment. He was one of those rare fighters that could just walk away. And walk away he did. But the story does not end there. Promoter Bob Arum traveled to New Hampshire months later with an offer. Leonard wanted a rematch. The money would be enormous. Millions of dollars for both men. Arum sat down with Hagler and laid it all out. He reminded him of the fortune he could make. Hagler listened quietly, then looked at Arum with cold eyes. "Bob, go tell Ray to get a life." It was not about the money, it was about principle. Hagler had explained his motivation years earlier. There are a lot of things in order to be at the top and maintain your focus. You have to have something that motivates you. For me, it was what I perceived as a lack of respect from the boxing world as well as the media, which made me want to work so hard and be great. Before walking away, Hagler made one final statement about his opponents. "No one is the same after I fought them. Hearns, Duran, Leonard. All of them." He was right. Hearns never reached the same heights. Leonard retired immediately after their fight. Duran lost his very next bout. But while Hagler walked away bitter, his impact on boxing created something unexpected. A blueprint that champions still study today. Bernard Hopkins became the undisputed middleweight champion years after Hagler retired. But Hopkins discovered Hagler long before he ever won a title. He found him while incarcerated, studying old fight footage and reading every article he could find. Hopkins later explained, "He was my idol. He was somebody I followed when I was incarcerated. Someone that I learned by reading and watching certain clippings of how he stayed ready and never had to actually get ready." Marvin Hagler was someone that I looked at that is a person that always came ready. What Hopkins learned from Hagler was not about flashy combinations or knockout power. It was something deeper. You never heard of Marvin Hagler staggering out of bars. You never heard of Marvin Hagler binging between fights where he gained 30 pounds. What he had was heart, determination, and his drive to be great all the time. He is consistent. Hopkins took that lesson and built a Hall of Fame career around it. He explained the philosophy simply. Marvin Hagler was not fast on his feet like the great Sugar Ray Leonard, but one thing he did have was great discipline. That is what I injected into my program of thinking and work ethics, behavior, and lifestyle. Marvin Hagler should be a blueprint on how to be basic and still become great. Hopkins would go on to say something that elevated Hagler above personal opinion. Marvin was the greatest middleweight ever because of the dominance of one division. By staying at 160, retired at 160, remembered at 160, and the legacy behind that. Hopkins placed Hagler in the same category as Muhammad Ali and Sugar Ray Robinson. The Ring magazine ranked him the 4th greatest middleweight of all time. The numbers backed it up. 12 successful title defenses, a reign lasting 6 years and 7 months. A 78% knockout rate, the highest among all undisputed middleweight champions. But statistics only tell part of the story. So what did all these fighters, from different eras and different styles, really see when they faced Marvin Hagler? Mike Tyson said it best, "You cannot keep Marvin Hagler off you." That relentless pressure was the first thing every opponent noticed. Hearns tried to use his reach and speed. Hagler walked through it. Duran tried to make him lead and counter. Hagler adjusted and hunted him down. Leonard tried to move and showboat. Hagler pursued him for 12 rounds. No matter what strategy you brought, Hagler kept coming forward. Always. The second thing they all discovered was that you could not hurt him. Hagler was officially knocked down only once in 67 professional fights, and that knockdown is still disputed. Hearns landed his best right hand and broke his own hand in the process. Teddy Atlas described that moment perfectly. The granite-chinned Hagler. There was a split second of a shudder, but it was gone. He walked right by. Even Hagler himself acknowledged toughness when he saw it. When asked who had the best chin of all his opponents, Hagler said, "Believe it or not, I have to give it to Alan Minter because he was champion and he did not want to lose. I hit this guy with a lot of punches and he took a couple on the chin. He took a lot of punishment." But the physical attributes were not what separated Hagler from everyone else. It was the mental game. Hagler once explained the danger of success with a famous quote, "It is tough to get out of bed to do road work at 5 in the morning when you have been sleeping in silk pajamas." Most champions get comfortable. Hagler fought against comfort every single day. He described himself simply, "If they cut my bald head open, they will find one big boxing glove. That is all I am. I live it." Total dedication, not talent, not genetics, a choice made every morning at 5 in the morning when the alarm went off. So let us go back to where we started. Joe Frazier said Marvin Hagler had 3 strikes against him. But every fighter who faced Hagler saw those 3 strikes become 3 reasons he became great. Being black in a prejudiced system developed an unbreakable will. Being a southpaw that opponents avoided forced him to master both stances. Being too good to get opportunities made him disciplined enough to be lethal. The real legacy is not the 62 wins or the 78% knockout rate. It is the transformation of obstacles into advantages. Bernard Hopkins called it the blueprint. Basic skills plus relentless discipline equals greatness. Modern fighters still study not his technique, but his mind. Hagler died in 2021 at age 66, but what fighters said about him lives forever. From Frazier's warning to Hopkins' blueprint, one thread runs through every quote: respect earned through dedication. What is your favorite Marvin Hagler moment? Drop it in the comments below. If you learned something new about the marvelous one, hit that like button. Subscribe for more deep dives into boxing's greatest legends. Share this with someone who needs to hear about turning obstacles into fuel. Joe Frazier was right about the 3 strikes, but what he did not know was that Marvin Hagler would turn each strike into a hammer and forge himself into a legend.